Yeah, it is tough, but congrats on him. You got to keep going, keep playing.
Good stuff. All right, let's dive in. Since we're talking corner, let's jump into the topic that we're going to lead off with here. We finally get to have some complete closure with this Jaire Alexander thing. I want to make sure I'm very, very clear here. In no way, shape, or form is this segment geared towards, hey, let's make Goody out to be an idiot. It ain't geared toward let's try to demonize Jaire Alexander. The point is to try to take a detailed look at, okay, how did they get to this point? Let's try to learn something and see exactly what went wrong. And again, it's not about putting blame on anyone. It's just simply, here's what happened. Here are the facts. And here's kind of Jaire's side of the story. And also, we've talked about the Packers side of the story this entire time. All right. So here we go. Jaire Alexander's father sounds off on his son's negotiations with the Packers. It's going to be a little bit lengthy. I'm going to try to pause in between and get your all's take on each of these points here. But let's just jump right into it. I put the end of the Jaire Alexander saga has officially arrived as he is signed with the Ravens. As we close this chapter in Packers history, let's recap Jaire's side of how things ended in Green Bay. So Landis Alexander, for those of you who don't know, went on ESPN Wisconsin yesterday, did a quick interview, about a 15-minute interview, right? And he posted on X between June 13th and June 18th of this year. He elaborated on during ESPN Wisconsin's interview, focused on three main issues: the Packers contract offer, the handling of Jaire's 2024 injuries, and misrepresentation about Jaire's willingness to negotiate. Below is a detailed breakdown of his remarks, organized by theme with direct quotes and context. All right. So number one, the Packers contract proposal and the lack of guaranteed money. All right. Landis Alexander, obviously Jaire's father, was highly critical of the Packers' proposed contract restructure, emphasizing that it offered no guaranteed money for 2025, which he deemed unacceptable for a player of Jaire's caliber. His specific comments included this. On the lack of guarantee, he said, quote, "The Packers sent over a proposal and it was like a non-proposal. To not have any guarantee in there was where we had the issue." Okay, that was part of that interview. He also said, quote, "Can't play on a contract with any guarantees." And another quote he had was he wasn't willing to play for damn near free. All right. On the offer structure, Landis described the offer as foolish to take, suggesting it was heavily incentive-laden with minimal base salary. One ex-post from Titletown Talks, citing Landis, claimed the Packers offered a $4.3 million deal, all incentive-based, with zero in guaranteed money. All right. While Landis did not confirm the exact figure in his own words, he endorsed the sentiment that the offer was insultingly low. Now, implications: Landis clarified that Jaire was very willing to structure, I repeat, he was very willing to restructure his existing deal, which had a $16.5 million non-guaranteed base salary for 2025, but the Packers' proposal relied on a per-game roster bonuses and other incentives, effectively tying Jaire's earnings to his availability each week. That was reported by the Acme Packing Company on June 14th. This structure, as Landis explained, meant Jaire would have to prove his health and performance weekly to earn his pay, a risky proposition for a 28-year-old with a recent injury history, 7 games played in 2024. He argued that such a deal was unreasonable for a former All-Pro, stating, quote, "He knows he's worth more, but he also knows he's been hurt." The lack of guarantees contrasted sharply with market standards for top cornerbacks such as L'Jarius Sneed's 2024 contract with the Titans, which is 4 years, $76.4 million with $55 million guaranteed. Now, it doesn't specify if it's practical guarantee, actual guarantee, but you get the gist of it. Landis's comments suggest Jaire sought at least partial guarantee to align with his proven value when healthy. Okay, now I want to say this. He did specifically say if it had been a $10 million deal, they just stayed. He said $8 million. He said, heck, $6 million, we wanted to be in Green Bay. So if they would have offered him the $6 million contract that Baltimore offered, he would have stayed in Green Bay, is basically what it's coming down to. Now, he's not saying it needed to be fully guaranteed, but the Packers basically said zero guarantee. Now, I know there's a lot of people, when we talk about this, and we'll get your all's take up to this point, and then we'll continue on with the article. I know there's many people, it's like, it needs to be incentive-based, it needs to be production-based, all that. So I imagine most people will probably agree with how the Packers handled it. You guys know where I stood at it. At the end of the day, I was thinking, man, if you can do $10 million guarantee and make him earn the other $7 million, I think it'd be worth it to bring him back. That was just me personally. So with that being said, let's pass it around. We'll start with let's start with you this time, Tim. I know you've been a big Jaire fan. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. I apologize, but I do want to get your take before you hear anybody else's, man. How do you feel about what we've learned here through Jaire's father? And again, this is Jaire's father's take. I have no reason to believe he's lying. It seems like everything kind of lines up with what he's saying here in terms of how the Packers.
Things could be a lot worse. We could be Bears fans, right? I don't know, man. This seeing all this now, you're going to get, obviously he signed over there in Baltimore, so we're going to start to get some more information. I'm sure we'll hear even more in the days and weeks to come about some of these specifics. But yeah, it is kind of interesting that his pops is kind of taking the lead here, kind of speaking almost like he's kind of his representation. And in a lot of ways he is. I mean, that's family, that's his son. So he has every right to discuss what he wants. I think a lot of this points back to the fact I keep thinking about locker room clean out after the season last year. And I think maybe both sides just kind of knew that they were going to be parting ways. Honestly, I don't think maybe either one of the sides made, super strong efforts to mend the relationship and, see a future in Green Bay for Jaire. So that could explain why there were no incentives added to or the contract was heavily incentive laden for an offer, nothing guaranteed at all. I think that's kind of borderline insulting to a veteran player, if you ask me, that you're not going to guarantee at least, part of the contract or part of the money. And we see what he got there in Baltimore. So I think it makes sense. We'll learn a little bit more here as we go on, but I'm just glad it's over, honestly, at this point. I don't know about how you guys feel, but I'm just kind of ready to move on and move forward. And clearly so was Jaire and so were the Packers. So it's kind of how this went down.
Yeah, Holmes MD once said, I listened to Josh Pops on KBN. The man sounded honest and genuine in explaining his perspective. Green Bay must not have wanted him. That would hurt my feelings as well. Emilio, the thing that really stood out to me as that whole interview was taking place and reading everything in between was the initial report by Rob Demovsky where they said Green Bay does not want him back. And fans just absolutely attacked Rob, saying, oh, he's just trying to run Ja out of town. They don't like Ja. The local beat reporters don't like Ja, on and on and on. Rob had it right. It seemed like the Packers were ready to move on from Ja. And, hey, let's throw one little, here you go, bub. If he accepts it, that's great news for the Packers. If not, we're ready to move on with Carrington and everyone else. But
right.
Your thoughts so far, man?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. What was kind of sitting on my mind was if he's like vet minimum, don't they have to give him, some type of guaranteed money to get him to vet minimum? So even if it was $1 million and change, he'd be losing out on $3 million or whatever. But reading what Ron said here, no, the NFL collective bargaining agreement does not allow for no guaranteed money for 7-year vets. Mm-hmm. So
some of it must have been guaranteed in the offer,
right? So
that's where you get into the practical or actual. I think he's talking about actual and not practical.
Okay, yeah, because that's where I was like, some of it has to be guaranteed, right? So obviously it's not zero. But
let me explain real quick what I mean by that. With what Ja's dad was saying was it was going to be roster bonus. That is considered guaranteed,
right?
In just layman's terms, all right, that's guaranteed money that if you're on the roster, you're guaranteed that money. But the players look at it like, if I'm not healthy, I'm not in the lineup, I'm not guaranteed that money. That's where Pat McAfee absolutely roasted Ian Rappaport for saying guaranteed money. And he said, is it really? He said, well, it's practical. And Pat McAfee lit his ass up like, that's not guaranteed. That's how the lingo is there. So within the CBA, when you talk about no guaranteed money, I guarantee you that falls under that category of guaranteed money. Go ahead, man.
I see what you're saying now. Yeah, because I mean that's obviously you gotta go get that money, but it's just tough to look at it. We look at it. Hey, we didn't pay Aaron Jones that extra $1 million, right? We've had a couple of these close ones where we're a little bit off, but hey, we tried. Aaron Jones was older with injuries. He kind of played through some of them. He kind of wasn't on the field for some of it. So, but I do think that it's another thing about Ja. I think we might have started, but Hafley wasn't happy with him, right? In some maybe his plays there. But right here, I'm sorry, Ron also said, I remember Hafley showing some frustration with trying to game plan when he never knew if Ja would play. think it was a big reason they decided to move on last year. To that point, Greg Cosell was talking with Ross Tucker, and they were saying that Ja's more of like a keyer and a cluer is what he had said, saying like Ja's going to kind of eyeball the quarterback, play the triangle on the receiver, and want to jump those routes, kind of play out just a little bit outside of his realm or whatever. And you can't trust a guy all the time when he's playing like that.
No, you can't. Jacob, what you got, big dog?
Yeah, I think we learned two major things in the last 24 hours. I think one is that Packer fans drastically overvalued what Jaire Alexander's worth was, and I think Jaire Alexander drastically overvalued what his worth was in the eyes of the NFL. It's shocking.
You think God never farted?
It's shocking to me that he was able to get signed for $6 million, whether or not it's fully guaranteed or not. To me, I think again we can deduce that from that the Packers didn't want him back. They didn't, and I think it's very clear that even to the point where I think that they could have offered him. You talk about $10 million guaranteed. They could have offered him probably $5 million guaranteed with 3 in incentives, and he sounds like he would have been back. They probably could have offered him 2 guaranteed with 4 incentive, and he would have been back. To me, it's very clear that I think the Packers were just done. That they saw the writing on the wall. They saw what they had. They saw the product that they got from the investment they made. The ROI wasn't worth anything what they thought it would be. And I think that mentally, like Ron commented on, I think that they just realized that he could be too far gone as far as being a cancer in the locker room, just with certain things he had done. And I think that in their eyes, they saw cut bait. We've got a new crop of guys coming in. This is a business. We're nowhere near. I mean, I couldn't believe how far away from that $17 million per year, you know what I'm saying, that the contract had him under, that teams weren't even willing to sniff a quarter of that barely. That's crazy. So, yeah, I think we have to read the tea leaves, and probably a lot of these, like you said, the press conferences, there's probably more truth in a lot of them than we wanted to believe at the time.
Yeah. And H.E. Soder says, reminder that the Packers training staff is more conservative. Job might get more games in Baltimore, but it could cost him something in the long term. I've been hearing this a lot. And this is something that's been talked about for the last decade, how conservative the Packers training staff is. This is a new training staff. It's a brand new training staff, right? And on top of that, if you think the Packers have been conservative, go say that to David Bakhtiari. Because David Bakhtiari's whole qualm was he was not ready to come back. He got pissed because the coaches and the training staff were trying to push him back on the field when his knee wasn't ready. Lo and behold, they put him out on the field. It swells up like a balloon. And then basically his career is over. And listen, could it have been over if that hadn't happened? It's possible. But I'm not one that subscribes to the Packers training staff as conservative. Jordan Love played with 3 injuries last year. Christian Watson went back in against Chicago and tore his ACL when he wasn't ready to go back in because Romeo Doubs was sick. I respectfully disagree with that take. And I remember hearing about this in 2013. Man, it just seems like the Packers are always holding their players out, and then other teams are playing with players that are hurt and this and that. And I used to believe it. I don't believe it anymore. And again, when you change training staffs, who else can you blame? It sounds like it's kind of an organizational thing. And I'm not even saying it should be blamed as a negative. Oh man, they need to change the way they do stuff. I'm just simply saying I can't agree with that take anymore. You know what I mean? Because it's, again, Kenny Clark. Why did Kenny Clark struggle last year, guys? He was hurt since week 1.
Right.
I mean, how many more examples do we need?
LBM played with a broken thumb.
You know what I'm saying? And again, this isn't the only team that plays with injuries. The NFL, you got to play hurt, right? Yeah. So this isn't a knock against the training staff or the Packers going, they're doing things wrong. I'm just simply pointing out, I don't think they're as conservative as we have all convinced ourselves, myself included. That makes sense.
My knee.
And that's another example, ain't it? He went out there with a fractured leg, didn't he? They shot him up, and he was high as a kite after the game. So, man, anyway, all right. So let's move along here because there's some other key points I want to get to, including injury, by the way. But number 2 on this list, willingness to negotiate and misrepresentation. Landis vehemently disputed reports that Jaire was unwilling to take a pay cut or negotiate. You guys remember when that report came out that he was not willing to take a pay cut or renegotiate? His dad's saying that was absolutely untrue. So I know we say, man, the players' side, they get their PR team out there and try to, paint this picture like their client's perfect, right? But on the flip side, I guarantee we know that report didn't come from the Packers or didn't come from Jaire. It came from the Packers, right? So they were kind of playing a little tug of war there as well. It says framing the issue as the Packers' refusal to offer a fair deal rather than Jaire's inflexibility. His key statements include on Jaire's willingness to restructure. This is not true. In response to claims that Jaire refused to negotiate his contract. Nobody ever said he wouldn't take a pay cut. He wasn't willing to play for darn near free is a better quote, is what he said on X. He absolutely wanted to stay in Green Bay. They insulted him by giving him no guarantee, all incentive-based deal that only a fool would sign. It was never about refusing to take a pay cut or thinking he is worth more. Now, this goes back to kind of the Aaron Rodgers take. You guys know there was a lot of conversation on X about this. Throughout this whole process was how Aaron was talking about how they mistreat older players on their way out the door. Again, you'd rather get rid of a player 1 year too early rather than 1 year too late. You could say it's cold-hearted, whatever. That's the business of football, man. And that's why I do not hold these players like I don't try to convince anyone or convince myself that a player is a bad person because they hold out for more money, because it goes both ways. A team's going to cut a player with 2 years left on their contract if it makes sense for them to cut him. A player's going to hold out with 2 years left on his contract if it makes sense for him to hold out because he's got leverage. I just kind of try to see both sides of it there. Here's the context and rebuttals. Landis was responding to media narratives, including reports from ESPN's Peter Schrager and others, suggesting Jaire rejected any pay reduction. He argued these claims misrepresented Jaire's position, emphasizing that Jaire was open to a reduced salary if it included some guaranteed money. He refuted the idea that Jaire thought he was worth more than the market, acknowledging Jaire's injury history, but insisting the Packers' offer was disrespectful. This aligns with earlier reports from May 27, 2025, indicating Jaire wanted to stay in Green Bay and was open to a reworked deal that was reported by the Acme Packing Company on May 27th. And then Landis comments suggest the Packers' proposal was perceived as a lowball offer, undermining Jaire's contributions as a former CB1 and two-time Pro Bowler 2020 and 2022. And I want to say this, the contract you're trying to sign a player to has nothing to do with what you've done in the past. You're trying to project what they're worth in the future, right? So that's where I kind of side with the team in that regard. I'll make a hill of beans that you were a two-time. I'm so sick of hearing two-time All-Pro or whatever it is, two-time Pro Bowler. Boys, we're talking about that was what, 5 years ago when his first Pro Bowl.
Yeah, he was a two-time Pro Bowler. Was he a Pro Bowler at any point when Jordan Love was our quarterback? You know what I mean?
No.
Right. Exactly. Injury management and trust issues. Landis alleged the Packers mishandled Jaire's 2024 injuries, a shoulder issue and a hamstring strain that limited him to 7 games, further eroding trust during negotiations. His specific claims include, now I don't know if it gets into the PCL here, but I was going to try to find it because it's just talking about the shoulder injury and everything there. He confirmed, and I put a tweet out about this. I say confirmed, but his side of the story, Landis' side of the story was that Jaire told them something's not right with the knee. Something's not right. And they waited 4 more weeks before they did a test or they did a scope, and that's where they found out the PCL injury. So that sounded a lot like the David Bakhtiari situation to me. It was like, hey, you're fine. We'll get you back out there in a couple of weeks type thing. So that's just weird. It's a weird way to approach that because with Bach, it was the old training staff, and with Jaire, it was the new training staff, right? So I don't know if you guys got any thoughts on that. Jacob, I'll let you go first this time, man. Is there anything you want to add to that in terms of how we're handling injuries? I know we covered a lot there in the last few minutes.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because Ryan brought it up on his podcast, I believe, this morning, that it was a weird situation because, like you said, okay, well, the common denominator here over the last few years is, like somebody said in the comment, well, they treat people bad as they get older. Well, yeah, you're not going to have as much time, effort, money, and dedication to a player who's literally aging out of the position, the role that they play in a team. So to me, that just makes logical sense. Like, I feel like the people get a little too invested in emotions and loyalty and all that kind of stuff in a game that there's no loyalty. There's no, guarantees in NFL football. And I think that it is interesting from a medical standpoint, like Holmes is referencing here, that Ryan brought up on his pod that they had the same issues with the previous training staff. Remember, everybody wanted, because they were like, what's going on? We can't stay healthy. We can't stop having hamstring issues. People are tearing their pecs. They're doing all this kind of stuff. Everybody said, okay, maybe they're the issue then. So Goody, they fired the whole staff. Remember that? They fired the whole training staff. They bring in another staff. Immediately, it's the same type stuff. So I think they realized, okay, what's the common denominator here? It's that Ja maybe isn't wanting to play at certain times when possibly guys that are quote unquote experts medically are saying, dude, he's good to go. Like medically, if he wants to push his body, he should be good to go. And then I think you probably do run into that parallel universe of having a guy like Aaron Rodgers says something. It's hard for other guys that get put into similar situations to just be like, oh yeah, I got the same treatment Rodgers did. Or it's like, you're not in the same boat. You're not in the same conversation. Some random Joe Schmo that, made the 53, but wasn't quite, treated right in their eyes. I feel like that could be a little bit of a bleeding into certain issues where do you know what I'm trying to say? Like Rodgers had the ball rolling. And so everybody felt like, hey, I'm going to jump on that train. We can blame the brass. We can blame the front office. Because clearly it's not our fault. But I feel like that those situations like Bakhtiari, Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, Devontae, those were situations where those guys were great players for us, and we had to decide to make decisions. Whereas like a lot of these players that are bringing this up now, I don't know. I feel like they're trying to kind of make themselves, to maybe throw the Packers under the bus to make themselves look a little better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Holmes MD1. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I think with Ja, it's more probably the medical side than the age. I mean, he's 28, right? He's not getting any younger, but he's definitely not over and above that dirty 30 age that we all know exists in the NFL. I don't care what team you play for.
Right.
And honestly, it's kind of funny, Clay. You brought up the parallel or the comparison to how Bakhtiari's knee injury was handled. They had Big Dave go, I believe, week 1 in Chicago. That was the last game he played for us. We all remember the one-fingered salute to the Bears fans at Soldier Field. That was awesome. I believe Ja re-aggravated that knee in a game at Soldier Field against Chicago as well. So it's kind of an interesting coincidence maybe, but it certainly does look like at least at some point during last season, Ja did make an effort to go, and it might have caused, some more damage to that knee for all we know.
Yeah. For sure. Holmes MD1 says, from a medical standpoint, I agree with Clay. There may have been a strategic fumble in regards to diagnostics. He's also said direct visualization by arthroscopy. Is that how you say that?
Arthroscopy. Yeah, arthroscopic.
I always hear arthroscopic, so I've never heard it as
arthroscopy. You got to talk like a doctor.
That's right. Well, good luck trying to get me to do that. My God. Is a gold standard for world-class athletes. Ja's dad said they found a bunch of junk when they finally did the scope. No bueno. So,
I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Neither. Holmes went on to say the initial diagnostic study of choice is MRI, possibly with a word I can't pronounce, for meniscal issues, not menstrual, but meniscal issues. I would think these enormously wealthy teams would prefer diagnostic. So here's the thing, man. Like, you can't help. I don't want to say what I'm about to say. Damn it. I hate talking about stuff like this. They've got the money, they've got the funds, they got the resources. It almost makes you think sometimes they just go, let's don't go that far. Let's just get them back on the field. You know what I'm saying? Like they're worried they'll find something in there and then it will shut it down. I don't know, man. Maybe I don't know.
I don't think that's crazy to think,
That's the same reason I don't go to the doctor, because they're going to be like, you got the cancer. I'll be like, I shouldn't have looked. I shouldn't have looked for it.
Oh, dude, my favorite thing is like, man, I tell you, I don't want to go into too much detail here because it'd get political, but last visit I had to the doctor, having some heart problems, blood flow problems, stuff like that, blood pressure, things like that. It's literally come in here, waste 3 hours, spend $600 and go, let's keep an eye on it. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. Awesome. All right. Well, great. We got nothing done today, and I'll see y'all in a few weeks. Sounds good. So WebMD, babies. Hey, I'm scared of WebMD. I'll put in WebMD and end up in a psych ward or something, man. It'll convince me I've got everything under the sun. So, Anything else on the Ja conversation? Emilio, anything else you got quiet up there, man?
Yeah, I don't know, man. You're not saying it's varsity blues, right? But yeah.
I'm gonna tear your arms off and beat you to death with them.
But no, I mean it's tough for Ja, right? Go get your money, do your thing. But even looking at the Ravens roster, here's their cornerbacks: Jalen Davis, Chidobe Awuzie, Marlon Humphrey, Bahal Cohn, Robert Longerbeam, Ruben Lowry, Keon Martin, Marquise Robinson, TJ Tampa, and Nate Wiggins.
Who?
I'm just saying that's. What if he doesn't even get a spot? They drafted Nate Wiggins last year. You know what I mean? Whatever, man. You gave it a shot. You tried to get your money. What if
Lamar's not going to let him cut Jaire? Stop it.
TJ Tampa.
Ja's going to become a wide receiver. He's going to be going both ways at Ravens camp now.
We're going to let Mountain Man Pack send us home here as we move on to the next topic. He says, quote, "We're all going to die." That's it. End of quote. So
it's beautiful.
I think there's some truth to that. Let's move it along here. So